Hi, everybody. Today's Friday, October 3rd, 2025, and our friends Larry Johnson and Colonel Wilkerson are back with us. Welcome back, Colonel and Larry.
Hey, this week's gone fast,
Man, I have.
and we give Colonel Wilkerson a shirt excuse day. He didn't have time to step into his Superman costume.
Actually, I hadn't washed any one of them.
Yeah. Larry, let's start with the case of Charlie Kirk. And we know that in my opinion, the only person who is trying to get something to understand what has happened during that day and talking about it is Candace Owens. And
Correct.
every day she has a new podcast talking about what has happened, those people who may involve in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And recently she brought out a person who is much more similar to the assassin and to the pictures that FBI published before finding Tyler Robinson. And there are many other videos coming out that they showed many other people, many multiple men in that event. They've been much more similar to the pictures than Tyler Robinson.
hmm
And what's your understanding of that? Is there any sort of discussion within FBI, or are they talking about these images? Are they talking about the way that they want to know what has happened during that day? What's your take on that?
Now, let me put it this way: um, Ray Charles, if he was still alive, he could be Tyler Robinson's defense attorney and would win the case hands down. You can be blind, but the fact of the matter is the evidence that the FBI has ginned up to accuse Tyler Robinson is not going to hold water at all. Everything from the claim that he'd had the rifle shoved down his pants. They got the one video of this guy limping across the street, and they claim, oh, that's the shooter. Except then we get the pictures of supposedly the same guy climbing the stairs, and instead of limping his legs, you can see his right knee and his left knee, they bend. Now, if you had a gun down your pants, it wouldn't be bending. So, that goes out the window. The claim that it was a 30-06 that killed Charlie, that's a lie. That's absolutely not true. And then you get the video where you can see the crowd reaction when the shot actually first takes place. Anybody that's been to a sporting event where they do the wave, where you stand up and, it goes around the stadium, that's essentially what you see. It starts as Charlie's looking at the audience, it starts from the left side and sweeps across as everybody, oh my God, somebody shot. That tells you that that's where the shot came from, not from behind where Tyler Robinson allegedly was. It came from more off to the left side and up. So it's just why. Oh, and Candace Owens dropped another great piece of information. 2 days ago, Kash Patel made a big announcement that they're breaking ties with the Anti-Defamation League. Oh, great. Turns out they'd been in bed with ADL targeting people like Charlie Kirk for years. And who did Kash Patel send? Which FBI person did he send out to the crime scene? But the FBI director from Connecticut. So you say, well, so what? Well, apparently in this Connecticut office, they share offices with the Anti-Defamation League. So why, out of all the possible FBI agents in the world, do you send the one guy that's sort of cohabitating with the Anti-Defamation League? So this thing stinks. And it's more and more looking like this is an effort to cover up and obfuscate the fact that 2 days before Charlie Kirk was killed, according to Candace Owens, he was going to break ties with Israel. So apparently he's going to break ties with Israel, and 2 days later he's dead. Happy coincidence? I don't know.
Carl, it's not just about Donald Trump and his administration is dealing with many issues.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Charlie,
You got to give me a chance to say something too.
go ahead, Colonel. Yeah, yeah.
You know, old Hercule Poirot, Agatha Christie's great detective, motive, method, and means. Motive, method, and means. Larry just told you who did it using those three criteria. Go ahead.
And Colonel, it's not just about Charlie Kirk. The administration is somehow they're not clarifying what's going on. What we did investigation with the case of Epstein yesterday, I had many emails talking about why have you stopped talking about Epstein files. And the case of Charlie Kirk, many people want to know what has happened. What is going on with the administration? They were criticizing the Biden administration because they said that they're not directly talking to the public. And Donald Trump wanted to change that tone. But nothing came out of the administration. Instead of that Russia gate that, in my opinion, Donald Trump had nothing to do with Russia, but he's creating new cycles of chaos within the administration, but this sort of attitude under par.
I think they're clowning around in a way that one could have predicted from the beginning, but in a way that even I find not just clownish, but absolutely amateurish and stupid. They don't deal with these crises the way, for example, Netanyahu would. Full steam ahead, keep telling what you're telling, and ignore the torpedoes that are headed at you. Instead, they increase the speed, velocity, and accuracy of the torpedoes. And when I say that, they're doing it with regard to their own base. That's whom they are losing, really, especially those under 40. And it's not just Israel, it's the Epstein case. It's all the pernicious lies that they continue to put out from the spokesperson, the official spokesperson, who thinks that Christian cross around her neck and her blonde hair and her pretty face and everything is all that's necessary to talk to the American people, certainly to MAGA people, to Kash Patel himself, to his deputy, to you name it in the administration. I mean, Hegseth and Trump themselves just demonstrated it at Quantico. They can't seem to handle their own words, their own propaganda, their own lies. They just keep doubling down, tripling down, and so forth, and trying to ignore it and push it away. And it's not going to go away, and it shouldn't go away. I mean, let's take Maxwell, for example. Here's a woman that was convicted of some of the most heinous crimes, in my mind, in American history. And she should be sitting in a maximum security prison awaiting the guillotine, among other things. And she's not. She's probably going to skate through this. And I think people are beginning to realize that. She's probably going to be resurrected. She's probably going to have a good life for the rest of her time and maybe go back to her old ways. This is unconscionable. And these people are not that brain dead and that stupid who are in MAGA. Some of them maybe, but most of them have a mind, and particularly the younger ones. Charlie Kirk was proving that. And they can't handle these scandals. They simply can't. They're not going to go away, and it's going to eat away. And it's going to make, I fear, it's going to make them even more interested in deploying the military in American cities and implementing what they want to implement, which is an attack, first of all, on the Democratic Party, and second of all, on all the things that equate with Islam in America, and third of all, in a way that more or less cements their ability to do whatever they want to do with the elections midterm and then later the presidential elections. That's their purpose, I think, now. Does Trump know all this? That's another worrisome thing. I'm not sure he does. I'm not sure he's not just the very inept mouthpiece for an administration that's really being run behind the scenes, completely behind the scenes. And it has different segments of that orchestration. Steve Miller's one, who I understand now is the main person behind the Ahmad Chalabi arrangement on Venezuela, feeding that information into the president. That's not very different from the information Cheney was feeding to the president with regard to Iraq's WMD. To the Epstein case, to the Charlie Kirk assassination, you name it. They aren't handling things very well at all. And Quantico was a perfect example of that. I don't think, I went back and watched some of the video again. I don't think I've ever seen a performance more inept by a Secretary of Defense and a president, both of them together. I mean, just totally inept. It just makes no sense what they did.
Larry, I want to ask you about the meeting that Pete Hegseth together with Donald Trump had with the admiral and generals. But before that, did you watch the video that the guy is shooting at a piece of meat together with the bones all together to show how the shooting would influence the body and the body of Charlie Kirk? What's your understanding of that? Because the shooting, do we know if there is some sort of investigation going on, if there is no images coming out? And from what we've seen, from what we've heard from Candace Owens, she saw the footage from the backside. There is nothing going on.
Right. No, there are a number of photos and videos out there now that do show the backside of Charlie. There was no exit wound. The video you're referring to is made by a retired Army Special Forces sergeant. He has a YouTube channel called Valhalla VFT, Victor Foxtrot Tango. He was demonstrating just the power of a 30-06 round. So, when they blew up, they shot a cow femur, and the cow femur is about the size of the average man's lower leg, full leg, but it's solid bone. And they put a 3-4 inch piece of meat on it. It was 3 to 4 inches thick. And, the 30-06 just completely shattered that. And he was trying to disprove this claim out of that initially came out that Charlie Kirk's neck stopped the bullet. And they called it neck of steel. Well, then they shot 1/4 inch piece of steel, a 3/8 inch piece of steel, and a 1/2 inch piece of steel. And for the 1/4 inch and the 3/8 inch, complete penetration. The bullet passed through. So all they were illustrating is this claim that the FBI made that it was a 30-06 round with a Mauser is not credible. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny. But then we also have the video evidence of what happened to Charlie. And what we see is that within fractions of a second, first minute he struck with the bullet, you see the front of his shirt pop up and out, and the back of his shirt pop up and out. But there was no bullet coming out. Well, that was caused by the shock wave from the bullet entering the body. It entered the body. It has a cavitation effect, which is, it's like waves going out, but moving at faster than the speed of light, just, rapidly movement. And that created such a pressure inside his chest that actually you can see his neck literally almost double in size as his chest is expanding.
It's the bulging.
Yeah. So it blew up inside his chest, which is why, even though the bullet penetrated where the carotid artery is, that's why we don't see any arterial blood spray. Anybody that's ever seen somebody that's had an arterial cut, it sprays, it pumps. The water just keeps coming out until the heart runs out of blood or they get the bleeding stopped. We didn't see that with Charlie. Instead, it was just that moment, and then all of a sudden a flood. It's like somebody turned on a beer tap and just flowing out of his body. Sorry to be so graphic, but it's important that people understand. So all of that video evidence does not support the claim that it was a 30-06. It was a smaller round. I've speculated that it could have been what they call a 300 blackout, which comes in both frangible and soft point. A frangible round is designed that when it enters human skin, goes through the skin, it's supposed to start breaking up. And particularly if it strikes something like the spinal column, it'll shatter into shards. And it is someone that I know who has spoken to a senior official at TPUSA, said, in fact, they found fragments of bullets, not a whole intact bullet. So that tells you that it's highly likely they used a frangible round. But this kid, Tyler Robinson, he didn't do this.
Yeah. Carl, do you think that the whole story of Charlie Kirk is somehow the main reason of what has happened, and what they're trying to do is because of Israel, because of, many people are, as you've mentioned, as Larry mentioned, many see that maybe Israel was behind it, but there are many other issues to be considered during considering the assassination. How we don't see, these people. You mentioned Kash Patel. Kash Patel, we were talking since this administration came to power, we're talking that maybe he could be a game changer in the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard may be a game changer in terms of the intelligence. But you don't see, it seems that Kash Patel is merging to the idea of those people in the administration who are running the show. He's not doing his job. He's just somehow covering their agenda. Do you see the same happening to Tulsi Gabbard? Because she's literally gone from the scene. We don't hear from her.
That's a lot to unpack. Let me start with your last comments. I don't think Tulsi Gabbard has any authority within the administration whatsoever. And I think she knows that. What do you do when you're the DNI and you're limited by your position already, because it is not a very powerful position? They did not give that position the money and the people power that it needed to be a powerful position. What happened to Larry?
I'm
He's
here.
going to be back.
Oh, okay.
I'm here.
Okay.
I was just blowing my nose. I didn't want to do it on camera.
Got it. Number one.
Yeah.
And for Patel, I don't know about him that much. I never have had a whole lot of respect for him. And I didn't, amongst the things that you said there, think that he was going to be a really clarion help for the FBI, which is already a bureau that I have very little use for. And that goes back a long way. So just unpacking that part of your question, I don't think the cabinet officers, other than their ability to speak, like, for example, the Secretary of the Treasury just did, or the Secretary of Commerce just did in an inept way, other than that, have any power at all. I think the power in the Trump administration is the people behind the administration. It really is the people who are moneyed and supporting this administration in different ways on different matters. And so Donald Trump is a mouthpiece for that. He doesn't know he is, I don't think. I think he's just an unwitting mouthpiece for it. But he is moved around by the people like Steve Miller and like others that have influence in various areas to go and do what he does periodically, to include what he did with Hegseth by showing up as the commander-in-chief at the Quantico meeting. So to ask a question about who has power in the administration and the statutory cabinet, if you will, is to ask a question that has no answer, other than they don't have power. They simply don't have power. I don't think Hegseth has any power, really. Not really. He's trying desperately to grasp some power, but I don't think he really does. And he can go to Quantico and pontificate all day long, and that doesn't accrue power to him. In fact, it diminishes what little power that he has. The stories I'm hearing about him now, I don't know that they're valid, but I'm hearing them frequently and from multiple sources, being shit-faced every night or in some way inebriated, are not helpful either. I'm sure the job is putting a lot of stress on him. But I don't think this is a cabinet you can evaluate from a perspective you just asked that question. They do not have any power. And the power they do have, the rhetoric, if you will, is used abusively and in strange ways. For example, the Commerce Secretary talking to the Europeans about what they should do to improve everything over there. But nonsense, absolute nonsense. Europe's falling apart financially, economically. And maybe he wants that. Maybe that's what he's looking for in the first place. I don't know. But I don't see this as a standard cabinet. I don't see it as a standard empowerment by the president of key members of that cabinet. I see it as he's their biggest enemy. And he sees them as his biggest enemy if they speak out or they do something that is opposite to what he wants. And they don't know what he wants from hour to hour, from moment to moment, particularly Gabbard. This Trinagua thing is a case in point. I think we're getting intelligence from an Ahmad Chalabi type team out there, think Iraqi National Congress, feeding intelligence through people on the staff. Miller stands out vividly, that Trump listens to, and that's where he's getting his intelligence on Venezuela. And so we're acting on Venezuela now with half a fleet at sea off of Venezuela, based on this specious evidence that's coming to him about Maduro's nefarious deeds. It remains to be seen what he's going to do. I've heard everything from a snatch operation like we performed on Noriega in Panama. Good luck with that. To a full-scale invasion. I don't know what we're going to do. And at the same time, we're looking at a renewed war with Iran. This is a chaotic administration at best and an absolutely insane one at worst.
Larry, what was the whole point of the meeting between Donald Trump and his Secretary of War and generals and admirals? What we're trying to do? What was the main objective, in your opinion?
I have no idea other than, as I've published the speculation of one possibility was simply, in order for them to have a conversation with the specific commanders, specifically the commander of Southcom and the commander of Central Command, that if they had called them there just individually, that would have attracted attention and tipped the hand that the United States is going to be carrying out military action against Venezuela and Iran. Instead, you do this both, so it's a cover for action. It's an excuse to bring them all to D.C. where you can talk to those two. But also to, I guess it was to, I can't even describe it as presenting a new philosophy. It was disturbing to me on so many levels as it was to Colonel Wilkerson. The fact that Donald Trump doesn't understand posse comitatus, which is a federal law, which prohibits U.S. troops going into cities unless they're under the auspices of a National Guard and it's been activated by a governor. The fact that Donald Trump doesn't understand that military personnel, ground personnel, infantry, that they're not law enforcement officers, that they don't think or act as law enforcement officers, and creating this meme that they're going to basically treat the citizens of America as enemies of the state. And I understand the frustration with the Antifa rioters, but again, the failure to deal with them is the fault of local authorities refusing to exercise the power that they have. And then Hegseth, I think Doug McGregor made the best point last night, where Hegseth tried to, he said, "Oh, you all took an oath to defend the Constitution," and actually he was talking about Mark Milley, and Milley had made this claim about the oath that they take, failing to understand that the other part of the oath was that you also follow the orders of civilian leaders. And so within this, we have people that do not like with Trump and Hegseth, who really don't have a good understanding of the legal foundations of this country, and they've embarked on sort of their own personal jihad. And it's going to end badly for us because Hegseth didn't come off as having any kind of gravitas at all. He was, he reminded me of a kid that, dresses up like a doctor and tries to pretend to be a doctor, but he's not. hasn't been to medical school. So this, but the other disturbing thing, and Colonel Wilkerson has heard me say this, is that there wasn't a single member of all of those assembled generals or admirals that stood up and walked out and said, "I'm not going to be party to this." They all went along, and that just tells me I view that as a form of cowardice, because I can't believe that every single man and woman in that crowd agreed with what Donald Trump was saying, because some of the things he said would constitute illegal orders. And instead of reacting, saying, "I resign my commission," and there are consequences that come with that, but at least you keep your integrity intact. None of them did.
Let me just add, Nima, that I perceived Trump's remarks, as incoherent as they sometimes were, as saying that he was going to use the military, militia maybe start, but maybe even active duty if the militia was not sufficient, to attack his Democratic opponents in their cities, essentially to attack his Democratic opponents in Chicago, in Portland, in LA, wherever they might be. You were not going to see these deployments in cities that registered as largely Republican. You were going to see them in cities that had Democrats. And he couched that in the idea of security, because he said the Democratic cities, New York, Chicago, are the worst run in the country. By the way, this has been Charles Koch's message for 35, 40 years in his attempt to take over state legislatures and so forth. Don't think that his fingerprints aren't somewhere in here too, as are many other billionaires. The second thing I perceived from it was, and I'll have to differ with Larry on this a little bit, I watched secure video teleconference go from being really rudimentary and frustrating out in PACOM, for example, in the early 80s, to being with President George W. Bush and that particular campaign in Iraq quintessentially wonderful. I mean, it was like the general was in the room with you and the president was in the room with the general. So you don't need to bring people in. And I would submit to you that it's more secure doing that than it is to bring people into a room at Quantico. And I think I know what room that was. I used to teach down there. 4 years I spent down there. That's insecure as hell, even if you try to secure it in the physical means that you have. So I don't know why they did this, other than the message Hegseth delivered, which was to tout his bona fides more than anything else. And what he did was not that at all. He ruptured any bona fides he might have had just by the nature of what he did, particularly the part where he talked to them as if he knew more about military operations than they did. It was extremely condescending. Go back and watch it again. Extremely condescending. And he's going to condescend to all the experience that was in that auditorium. What experience does Hegseth have? What? He has zero experience. Zero experience at the level that he was talking to. So it's a bizarre thing to me that they did this at all, other than what they wanted to do. Hegseth show his bona fides. He didn't do that at all. And Trump tell those people and see what their reaction was, that they were going to help him eliminate the Democrats. And oh, by the way, at the same time, we're going to eliminate Muslims because we've got too many Muslims in the cities. And my God, they're going to build Sharia law or something pretty soon. So we got to eradicate them. And he's got plenty of people in his administration and advisory capacities who believe that and want to put that out on the world. They think Muslims are going to take this country over, and Europe too. That was part of the Commerce Secretary's remarks offline, that you got too many Muslims in your midst. They're going to take you over. It's bizarre, Nima. And this meeting was bizarre, unless you accept, I think, and I have, that this is a clown show. It's a clown show, but underneath the clown show, that three-ring circus consisting of the president in the center ring, Rubio in the left or right wing, whichever way you want to go, and Hegseth in the other. This three-ring circus has some very dangerous people behind it. Very dangerous people. Not the worst of which are those who were with us in the 30s. who really want fascism in this country and see Trump and his minions as the instrument of choice right now to achieving it. And Trump is doing, and Hegseth is doing enough things domestically to make me think that there is some cognizance of that in both men's minds, and they're fully okay with it. That's a hell of a statement to make, but I do think I go back to my comments before. They didn't fail on January the 6th because the system stood. They failed because the coup plotters were incompetent. They will not be incompetent again.
Larry, looking at the Middle East and the way that Russia is providing, it seems that Russia is providing Iran with weapons and with air defense systems. We've heard from Iranian officials, by the way, yesterday and the day before, that they have received S-400 and fighter jets, MiG-29, if I'm not mistaken.
Blankers,
And,
I think. Yeah.
yeah. How do you see the situation in the Middle East? Are we on the verge of a new war in the Middle East?
Well, short answer is yes. Let me just make one other comment relevant to Hegseth and Trump, this rechristening the Department of Defense as the Department of War. You know, the Department of Defense was created in 1947, but it became official in 1949. Yeah, there was, before that, it was the Secretary of War during World War II when we were at war. But the concept of Department of Defense was not to imply being passive, but it was implied to protect, not to go out and attack. Now, Trump and Hegseth have flipped that on its head, and they're now touting that the United States is going to be ready to go to war. Well, that's exactly what we're preparing to do now, it looks like, with respect to Iran and with Venezuela. You do not deploy, 4 missile destroyers off of the coast of Venezuela and 3 amphibious landing ships and a cruiser and a whole complement of a squadron of F-35 jets. It's just an exercise. This is not a military exercise. This is they are being geared up for an attack. And similarly, we're seeing the flow now of aircraft, combat aircraft, and naval forces back towards the Persian Gulf, back towards the vicinity of Iran. So instead of coming at this with the mentality of what can we do to de-escalate and minimize the chance of war, Trump, despite his aspirations for a Nobel Peace Prize, appears to be doing everything he can to provoke a new war. Now, the good news for Iran is it's not sitting back and doing nothing and waiting to be attacked again. I think they fully understand they're going to be attacked. And only this time they're going to be ready in a way that, unlike last time, where they did not retaliate immediately against the United States. They focused their attacks on Israel. And even in the attacks on Israel, they limited their response. They didn't unload what they were fully capable of. If Iran's attacked again, I anticipate that they're going to fully unload both on Israel and the United States. Because at that point, they'll realize they are in a war with the United States. The United States is taking no steps to hide that.
Yeah. No, I think Larry's right about that. I would add to the panoply of force that's off Venezuela. I heard yesterday that the relatively new cruise ship that the special operating forces have is there with them. This is a huge complex that SOCOM got, money to buy. And it sails around on the high seas and supports such things as operations against other ships that might be suspected of radioactive material or drugs or whatever, contraband in general. And it's sort of like a home for special operating forces, everything from Delta to Rangers to whomever wants to occupy the berths on it at the time. That's there too, which is worrisome from the perspective of pulling off a Noriega type operation versus Maduro in Venezuela. And I agree with Larry 100% on the Iran business. If I were the Persians right now, you know the Iranians, Nima, I would say to the United States, come on, we're going to defeat Israel, and we're not going to do anything to you until the defeat is complete. But if you join Israel, we're going to take you on too. I'd make that public. I'd say that publicly, or at least privately to the people that count. I don't want a war with you. I don't want a war with you. Israel's going to start this, and I'm going to finish it, and I'm going to finish Israel. If you can't take that to the extent that you have to come in, then I'm going to take you on too. And I may go down, but you're going to go down with me.
Larry, since last time we had the conflict, the war between Iran and Israel, what Israel has that is new, it's something game changer, or somehow they feel more confident to go to war with Iran? What did they receive from the United States, in your opinion?
Nothing. I mean, the United States can't give them anything that'd be a game changer. We don't have one. The big game changer would be an air defense system that works that neither Israel nor the United States has. The only two countries with actually proven competent air defense particularly against ballistic missiles and hypersonic missiles are Russia and China. Now, it's interesting that I forget the Chinese system, I think it's called an HB9. Venezuela reportedly has that. So the fact that the Chinese have armed the Venezuelans with an air defense system, I don't know if it's capable of stopping an F-35. We'll find out. But this push across the globe to go to war on the part of the West. I mean, it's not Russia and China that are agitating and creating provocations to try to elicit a retaliation by us. We're doing the provocations. Iran has taken every step possible to show that it wanted to negotiate. That's why it signed that Cairo agreement to allow the IAEA back into Iran for inspections, even though the IAEA had been used as a vehicle to spy on Iran, and that information ultimately was used to kill Iranian scientists. Nonetheless, Iran was still willing to follow, to comply with international regulations. I mean, here's the fact that Iran, prior to the June 13th attack by Israel, it was a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It was a signatory. It was a part of the IAEA, accepted IAEA protocols. It was playing by the rules. And because they played by the rules, they got attacked, bombed, and top personnel murdered. It sends a pretty clear message that you don't want to play by those international rules anymore.
Colonel,
the power in the world that everyone is learning to hate is not Iran. It's not Russia. It's not China. The power in the world that everyone is learning to hate, other than the power itself, is us.
Yeah.
You know what's so amazing in terms of the Iranian public opinion and how the war in Iran has changed that? I literally see the people who were criticizing totally against the government in Iran. And right now, what do you know what they're arguing in Iran? They say, so if Israel is attacking each and every country in the region, if they have the nuclear bombs, so we didn't attack anybody in the region. It's been 200 years that we haven't invaded any countries. We didn't attack them. We don't use nuclear. We don't have nuclear weapons. We're part of NPT. We're doing everything to somehow to tell the West that we're not pursuing, we're not seeking for nuclear weapons. But after all, we are attacked while we are negotiating with the United States. You know, it's changing drastically the public opinion in Iran. They don't feel that sort of, before that, they were thinking that the government in Iran is so hesitant to talk with the United States. The government doesn't want to negotiate with the West, with the United States. But that tone has totally changed, Larry, Carl. And I don't know if there is anybody in the United States, is there anybody who understands the situation in Iran and to talk about these issues that the people, because the main goal in my opinion, after all, is regime change. That is not going to happen.
No, I think the regime will go down completely in a war, not by its own people's hands, but in a war, before it will allow that to happen. And they've got the wherewithal now and the support now, probably to make it a very dicey game, even with the empire participating. I think you're right about that. And I think the cohesiveness of the Iranian people is a significant factor that if it were to devolve to the only way the United States could really affect regime change, that would be putting troops on the ground in Iran. They'd stymie it. We'd be looking at Afghanistan times 5 and cost of blood and treasure and years, and it wouldn't be any better at the end. It'd be a disaster for both countries, absolute disaster, and a disaster for the region. I'm more worried right now, though, about what I'm hearing about what the Israelis have done with their capacity from a submarine to use a nuclear weapon, and getting them into this existential position where perhaps the United States, Donald Trump, is somewhat hesitant for a moment or two to do anything to resurrect Israel once it is in existential peril, going down, in other words. This is a very dangerous situation. The dangerous nuclear power in the Levant is not Iran, whether it is latent, as we say the Japanese are, or actual. It's not Iran. It's Israel. It's Israel, demonstrated conclusively since October the 7th, with more evidence every single day that has transpired since then, that this is the homicidal, maniacal country in the Levant, and that it will not stop until someone stops it. That's the reality we're confronting. Look at this deal. If you haven't read Daniel Levy's piece, I'll send it to you. He talks about this deal, and he tears it apart, absolutely shreds it from one end to the other. This is no deal. This is more of the same without really good disguise. And Tony Blair is the apple on the top of the cake. I mean, it's incredible what we're expecting Hamas and the region to accept in a way that this deal is constructed. It's preposterous. You might as well just say, okay, bye-bye Palestine, bye-bye Palestinians, but we're going to put a little cosmetic on it, and we're going to let Blair make a couple of $100 million more off doing it.
Larry, Pakistan is saying that the peace plan of Donald Trump is different from what they have agreed upon with the Arab states, because they sent a draft to Arab states, and what is right now they're talking. It seems that Netanyahu did his sort of correction in the peace plan. I don't know. Is that promising for the Arab states, the way that Donald Trump is? Because he said, here is what he said yesterday.
Done 7 wars. We put out 7 wars. Now it could be 8. You reported, you were there yesterday. Mm-hmm. It looks like the Middle East could very well be solved after 3,000 years approximately. We're going to have more than Gaza. We're going to have Gaza plus peace, overall peace. That would be an amazing achievement. And then we'll get Russia taken care of somehow. We're going to get that. I thought that would be an easy one. That's been a difficult one.
Nima, I got to say one thing quickly. 3,000 years? Are you kidding me? For 2,500 of those 3,000 years, it was a relatively peaceful place.
Yeah. You know,
it's only when the British and the Americans entered the scene.
I'm going to play a clip to your point, Karan, but let Larry puts out his comment.
Yeah.
Well, Jeffrey Sachs, who was at the UN when all of this was going on and spoke with the members of the Arab delegation that Trump had met with, confirmed that what Trump announced with Bibi Netanyahu was a betrayal, or was completely at odds with what they had agreed with, what the Arab countries had been told would be in the plan. I find Vladimir Putin's reaction to this is, I think, worth taking note of. In his speech yesterday at Valdai, he had ample opportunity to go out of his way to, if you will, attack Donald Trump and some of his rhetoric and, call the plan stupid. But instead, Putin remained on the high road, and he said he welcomed Trump's initiative but added, provided that it is a two-state solution. So, again, he's maintaining that, yeah, there's a diplomatic way, but it's got to have a two-state solution. Well, Netanyahu blew up that plan right away on the day of he was with Trump, when he gets back to Israel and tells people in Hebrew, we're not going to do that. There's never going to be a Palestinian state. So, I think a lot of the Arab and Islamic countries, they want to appear to be reasonable, that, yeah, they're willing to entertain Trump's plan. But the fact of the matter is, Trump is completely, as Colonel Wilkerson said earlier, completely owned, bought and paid for by the Zionists, which includes Jews and Christians. This wealthy class that are Zionists and flood the money into Israel and to manipulate public opinion in the United States, they're now actually facing a real threat. Because if you've seen, Tucker Carlson is not backing down one bit. And the other night when he interviewed Jeffrey Sachs, the interview came about 20 minutes after Tucker delivered a monologue, basically saying, why in the world is the United States, of a country of 350 million people, surrendering itself and letting itself being led around by the nose by a country of 7 million, where we have to subsume our interests to theirs? No. And so it was forthright, and he's doubling down. And that's, I think, where we're at now. This entire Gaza peace plan, looks to me, it was designed more for a domestic political effect in the United States, maybe to try to calm some of this growing anger and outrage directed at the Zionists. But I don't think it's going to work. And in the plan, as I wrote the night it came out, it's dead on arrival. It's not going anywhere.
And as Larry just described, that's the realization, however incoherently, inchoately, or whatever, a realization that Charlie Kirk was coming to.
Mm-hmm.
And he tried, if you read those 6 pages closely, he tried to communicate that as well he could without alienating him completely, Bibi Netanyahu, with that fact. And, he's dead.
Colonel, what Larry mentioned, the interview that Jeffrey Sachs had with Tucker Carlson, one of the main points, in my opinion, during the interview was the way that Jeffrey Sachs talked about the origin of Zionism. He said that it came out of the British Empire, the same sort of idea, and they have influenced liberal Jews, and we had Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists joining together. But after all, the whole idea came out of the British Empire. This colonialism, this sort of, we can do whatever we want to do, and but looking at the way that Jeffrey Sachs is putting out the concept of Zionism, do you feel that we are still dealing with the British Empire? I would say in Ukraine and in the Middle East.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can't do away with the perfidious Albion, as people called them at the time. They're still there. They're living off the vestiges of their empire that are empowered by us, essentially, but nonetheless, they're still there. I go back to that message that the CIA station chief, I think he was in Beirut in 48, just after the war, sent back to CIA headquarters, copy to the president and the Secretary of Defense. And that message essentially said, in essence, quit talking to me about the Soviets. They're not my enemy out here. My enemy's the British trying to hold on to their empire. He died in a plane about a week after that, if I recall correctly. Mysterious death because the plane went down in the desert and nobody knew why. He was still the truth. The big enemy we had for so long, and we knew it. We just didn't want to profess it because we had people who were Anglophiles, and rightfully so, especially with Eisenhower. Eisenhower reversed himself, of course, completely in 56, but he was a huge, I mean, you can't spend all the time he spent in England. He spent most of his time in England and not be beloved of Winston Churchill and that whole crew. We have been operating as the protector for the vestiges of the British Empire and for a long time, arguably since it collapsed in 56. England's fingerprints are on all this. And I go back to Napoleon in 17, what was it? When he right before he lost his fleet to Nelson in the Battle of the Nile, he was beginning to understand how powerful the different Jewish conclaves were in that area he was trying to take over, primarily Egypt, but around the area, Syria and such. And he began to incorporate them because they had money, they had influence, and they were good fighters. That kind of started, I think, in history, this idea of resurrecting the Jews of old for allies in key areas. And it got picked up by the British in a big way when they realized what was happening to their empire, particularly World War I and then World War II pretty much put the finishing touches on it. And that became a sort of a policy that people actually tried to put together, that you would use the money and the fighting power of Jews in that region to help you in keeping your empire intact. And it just got passed on to us. And it cost the British dearly, of course. What was the King David Hotel, where they lost a lot of their people because of the terrorists, the Jewish terrorists. Jews have always been the best terrorists in the world. I mean, I'm sorry. And I'm not saying Israelis. I'm saying Jews have been the best terrorists in the world.
Larry, the other sensitive point that Jeffrey Sachs and Dr. Carlson talked about yesterday was the case of Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Mm-hmm.
And here is what they talk about.
Of rebuilding the temple is almost never discussed publicly in the United States, but there is a huge effort, by the way, bankrolled by a lot of Christians, just to be completely clear, in the state of Texas, for example. There's a whole foundation, a number of foundations designed to abet this. But there is this kind of behind-the-scenes push to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, which would require destroying the third holiest place in Islam, the mosque, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I've talked to a bunch of people about this who think that it's imminent, that it's not crazy to think that that mosque would be blown up in order to make way for the third temple. Do you fear that? If that happens, what happens next?
Well, the extremism on display in Israel is, as I said, the most lawless in the world today. Israel is the rogue state of the whole world. Israel flagrantly violates every limit. Israel goes to war where it wants to. It murders foreign leaders where and when it wants to. It acts with complete impunity and disdain. And Netanyahu thinks that he controls, and maybe he does, the U.S. government, so that whatever he does, he thinks he can get away with. So there's no doubt that there is a third temple movement that is part of this coalition. No doubt that there are people in this government who have absolutely no limit, who talk openly about, well, they've already said to make Gaza completely uninhabitable and unlivable. That is ethnic cleansing or genocide or a combination of the two.
Yeah.
And he didn't mention the fact that Ben-Gvir has actually gone to the Temple Mount and said he was going to do just what Jeffrey intimated.
Yeah, I think most of the people that watching us now or listening are not people that have been raised or grown up in a culture, what I'll call the eschatological culture. Eschatology is the doctrine of last things. It's this concept that you in the books that you accept as holy scripture, whether we're talking Old Testament, New Testament, or the Quran, that within that there are passages that talk about events in the future or what bring the end of times and judgment. And people who've not been raised around that don't understand how deep that is within these people who believe that. And accordingly, they will they'll even try to take action to make those things come to pass. There is a large within the Zionist crowd. It's not just Jewish; it's Christian. But in these ultra Zionist crowd, they really believe that we've got to have the battle of Armageddon, because this is all now. From the Christian perspective, this is the preparation for the return of Jesus. From the conservative Jewish position, it's not the return of Jesus, it's the coming of the Messiah. They do not accept Jesus as the Messiah. And I'm not really in depth with the Muslim outlook, but they have a coming of a return of a prophet.
But Larry, they say the guy they call it Mahdi, one of the sons of the Prophet Muhammad, he's gonna come back with Jesus.
With Jesus, exactly. I was just getting ready to say that. So, this religious it's involved with with the Muslims, with the Christians, with the Jews, and yet a lot of these secular leaders, like Donald Trump, he doesn't understand that at all. He's not motivated. He doesn't even understand the motivations. Neither does Bibi Netanyahu. He's not driven by that. Now, as Colonel Wilkerson noted, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, absolutely. I mean, they believe it, and they've reportedly got their hands on a red heifer because they're going to sacrifice this animal that will killing this animal that's completely pure, not a black hair, not a white hair on it. It's completely red. And when they kill it, apparently this is going to usher in the return of the Messiah. So these people are, they're the same mentality as Jim Jones. Remember the crazed religion guy who went to South America and had all of his followers commit suicide? That's the mentality we're talking about here. And people may think, "Oh, Johnson, you're way out of touch." No, these people really believe that, and they're moving in the midst where I argue the majority of people are not imbued with that religious perspective or understanding, so they really don't understand what's going on before their eyes.
And if you want to see that really exemplified, go to Pastor John Hagee's Christians United for Israel conferences. You just won't believe this. I mean, they are locked together, knowing, even if they've read Hagee's books, that this person on my right with whom I'm locked arms here is going to die because Jesus is going to kill them. They're unbelievers, but they're together. They're together, and they're together for the end times, each having a different appreciation of the end times they are envisioning that is antithetical to the survival of the other side, and yet they're allied. Hagee sent $300 million to West Bank settlements.
Yeah. Carl, I really believe that what's going on in the Middle East is against not only Muslims, but also Jews and Christians, but against humanity. Let's put it this way.
Yes.
And Donald Trump mentioned that there were no peace and there was no peace in the Middle East, but that's totally false.
Yes.
Looking at what Professor Avi Shalem said, he's a Jewish, Israeli, and he said that he just talking about to that point that Donald Trump has mentioned that you pointed out.
Before the emergence of the State of Israel in 1948, there was a large number of Jews living in the Arab world, something like 800,000. And there were Jews in Lebanon, in Syria, in Egypt, and Iraq. The Jewish community in Iraq was the most ancient, going back to 2.5 millennia ago. It was the most prosperous, the most successful, and the best integrated into local society. But before 48, there were Jews throughout the Arab world, and Muslim-Jewish coexistence was not a distant dream. It was everyday reality. The Jews and Arabs lived side by side until the arrival of Zionism. My family and I, we were Arab Jews. We spoke Arabic at home. We didn't speak any other language. Our culture was Arab culture. Our food was the most delicious, spicy Middle Eastern food. It wasn't European food. So in every sense of the word, we were Arab Jews. We Arab Jews had much more in common, linguistically and culturally, with non-Jews around us. We had much more in common with them than we had with Jews in Eastern Europe. In March 1950, the Iraqi parliament passed a law which said any Jew who wants to leave the country is free to do so. They have a year to register to leave on a one-way visa. And not many Jews registered to leave. And in the next year, 5 bombs exploded in Jewish premises in Baghdad, and that created a panic, and that helped to precipitate the exodus to Israel. Yosef Basri, 28-year-old lawyer and an ardent Zionist, and he was responsible for 3 out of the 5 bombs. The controller of Basri was an Israeli intelligence officer called Max Binet. He gave him the orders, he gave him the TNT. In 1950, there were 135,000 Jews in Iraq. By the end of 1952, there were only about 10,000 Jews left in Iraq, and 125,000 Jews ended up in Israel. We left Iraq as Jews, and we arrived in Israel as Iraqis. But the problem is that Israel claims to be the state of the Jews. Israel claims to speak on behalf of all Jews everywhere. Zionism is an Ashkenazi thing. It's nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
There's some history for you, some accurate history.
And the people feel it. They see that what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Lebanon. They're destroying everything. What's going on in Palestine. It's not just about Muslims, it's about Christians. The heritage of Jewish people, Christian people, Muslim people in that region is getting destroyed by these sort of endless wars in the Middle East.
And my point, I still keep insisting. I know people don't like this, but my point is Israel is doing that in order to fulfill the radical Zionist dream, perhaps. But we're using that. We're using that to destabilize the Levant. We're using that to regime change in these countries that we don't like, the last one of which is Iran. So, I mean, you can blame Israel all day long. And I had this conversation. I was just up at Columbia University for the Peace Games with Jeff Sachs. And I had this conversation with lunch table almost every time we sat down. We're doing it. We're empowering it. If you want to hate somebody, you can hate Bibi. You can hate those people who are running Israel right now. That's fine. But you got to hate us too, as Gideon Levy says all the time. Those bombs falling off those F-16s, those 250s and 500-pound bombs, they might as well have been delivered from Lockheed Martin or, whoever made them. As well as Israel being complicit. We are ultimately complicit too. And we want it to happen. I served in an administration that wanted it to happen.
Yeah. Larry, NBC reported that Donald Trump has told agencies to share intelligence with the Zelensky administration to help guide long-range missile and drone strikes on Russia's energy infrastructure. This is the first time since Donald Trump took power they're talking about these, sharing the intelligence to attack Russia deep inside the territory. What is happening in terms of the conflict in Ukraine?
Well, they can share all the intelligence they want. What are they going to? What's Ukraine going to fire? They don't have anything capable of achieving what they're talking about, that penetration deeper inside Russia. But President Putin was asked about this yesterday at Valdai, and again, he stayed very even keeled, didn't get upset, didn't get emotional about it. I think if it had been Medvedev asking him, he would have had some other spicier responses. But Putin acknowledged, says, basically, if the United States provides that intelligence and provides a Tomahawk missile, he says, we'd view that would fundamentally change our relationship with Washington. He didn't make any threats, but he just said it would. And he went on to say, look, we're capable of handling that threat. We'd shoot it down. But he said this would change the relationship with Washington. Lavrov had, in an earlier conversation, made it quite clear this would be considered an act of war. And these outlandish, I'll call that an outlandish statement, that's becoming more frequent and more outlandish with each passing week as the military situation on the ground worsens for Ukraine. And the Russians they're not letting up at all in their attack on the electrical infrastructure, the power grid of Ukraine. Ukraine is really going to be in a pretty desperate, grim situation in a month or so, more so than it ever has been during the course of this, now 2.5-year war, or 2 years, 8 months. This is Putin acknowledged it's a reality, but he didn't get upset, and he didn't make any reverse threats to the United States. So, they're hopeful that they can work out a deal with the United States, but if they don't, he's just sort of matter of fact, we're going to finish this militarily, and it'll be up to the U.S. and Europeans to pick up the wreckage.
Carl, Putin was asked about the paper tiger. Donald Trump was calling Russia paper tiger. Here is what he responded.
Yeah, so it
hold the strategic initiative in a confident way in all these locations, but actually we've been advancing steadily and resolutely. Are we a paper tiger? Then what is NATO in this case? What is NATO like if we're a paper tiger? Okay. The main thing for us is to maintain our.
And the guy is so good.
Yeah, what he could have said, but he's too politic to have said it, is the United States is a paper tiger, and he would have been absolutely correct.
Yeah,
Colonel,
with one exception, close to 6,000 nuclear warheads.
Keith Kellogg said that the senior officials in Washington believe that Russia cannot win the conflict in Ukraine. Who are these senior officials that know more than Keith Kellogg, that they have more, military experience, that they somehow decide about the conflict in Ukraine, technically?
Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think, there's something more pernicious going on, because, again, Cy Hirsch put out a piece where he's, excuse me, get that phone off, where he's being told by senior officials that Russia can't win this. I think it's people like John Ratcliffe and other senior intelligence officials. They're actually they're putting out lies and misinformation, and as such, it's guiding U.S. policy into very dangerous waters. So this notion that Russia's weak, Russia's failing on the battlefield, and that all we got to do is just put a little more pressure and they'll be defeated. You know what? They might as well be touting that the Easter Bunny will be joining Santa Claus on Christmas Eve because it's fantastical.
As we talk,
Neiman, I just want to add that when I was in the Bush administration, I was late to learn that there were people in the CIA and there were people elsewhere within the intelligence complex who had been kept away from Powell and away from preparation for the UN presentation, for example, in February the 5th, 2003, who dissented majorly on what we were getting from Tenet and from McLaughlin in particular, and others that were allowed to get in front of Powell. What I thought probably was happening today was that same phenomenon, that in fact there were people in Mossad, in MI6, in CIA who knew the truth and weren't being allowed to get it up.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have learned subsequent to that the drinking each other's Kool-Aid, for example, amongst that triumvirate of intelligence expertise has caused even the bowels of those organizations, not to say there aren't a few dissenters, but to go along with the line, go along with the stated line. So now we have, intelligence entities who are participating in the hoax.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Because, they've convinced themselves that Russia's got major oil shortages. And I'm in contact with a former West Point graduate who's now, he's of Russian heritage. His family fled the Bolsheviks. He graduated in 1972 from West Point, I believe. And he served 20 years in the U.S. Army. But now he lives in Moscow. And, when I asked him, I said, boy, they're over here claiming the economy's falling apart and the gas shortages. He goes, I don't know anything about gas shortages. He said, I don't even own a car. Public transportation is terrific.
It's kind of like Vienna.
Yeah.
Anywhere.
So the intelligent, instead of, I hang this on Tulsi Gabbard because she's in a position to actually stop the lying, but she's now aiding and abetting it.
The other important issue that Putin would talk about yesterday was the drone issue. He said that today we've learned that in southern part of Germany, in Munich airport, in southern part of Germany, there been some sort of drone in the sky that they're so much afraid that the airport was closed because of the incident, because of drones. Putin said that the reason of these drones, and they're not Russians. First of all, he said that they're not Russians. Our drones they're not capable of going that far to Portugal, to Germany. And the other point was that they're trying to militarize Europe. That's why the main reason of these drones, Colonel. But he didn't mention false flag operations. They may do something in terms of the false flag, Colonel. Your take on that?
I very well could be happening. I mean, Nima, I go up to my daughter's farm in Mount Airy, Maryland, and she takes me out with a pair of 750s, just regular 750 binoculars. And we look up in the sky and see sometimes as many as 25 or 30 drones of all manner of sizes, huge drones that look like they might be some sort of platform. We thought, looking at them one night, perhaps Amazon was participating in delivery vehicles or whatever. And we were looking at the mothership, so to speak, and the little drones would come and go and come and go. And this went on for nights on end. I mean, 6 months. What's happening around the world with drones? is all my point is. You see it everywhere. And to say that they're using them for nefarious purposes doesn't surprise me at all. False flag or otherwise, scaring Europeans or otherwise.
Yeah. Larry, your take before wrapping up.
Yeah, we saw the other yesterday. They arrested 3 Germans. I think it was up at either Norway or Sweden or Denmark that were the ones responsible for flying these drones into restricted airspace. So it was Germans, not Russians. So this is the Europeans are desperate to try to create a situation to, quote, go to war with Russia, except they're completely unprepared and do not have the wherewithal to go to war with Russia. As Putin noted, Russia's been fighting NATO now since the 2022 and has been doing a good job despite having all of NATO, the United States and all the major European countries against her. Russia's prevailing and will prevail.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Carl and Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, me too.
See you soon.
I missed the color. I'll have a shirt next time.
Yeah, great.
All right. Later.
See you. Bye-bye.